Hey everybody, this is Carl back again for another movie spoiler review. And today I will be covering the Marvel Phase 4, Phase 1 Marvel's Thor, the first one. I want to make sure I get this out because now that I've pretty much covered, this will be like me completely covering Phase 1 of the MCU. Because next year I'm planning on covering the first Avengers film. I just want to make sure I cover at least, like, because I already went through Captain America, all three Iron Mans. Uh, well, only I'm pretty sure I covered like Captain America 2 as well. I know I did one. Yeah, I did. I did the first two Captain America films. I did um all three Iron Man films, and uh yeah, I should be, you know, yeah, after this, it should be like the only thing. I just want to make sure I did not miss anything. Oh, the Incredible Hulk. That's another thing. I need to go through the Incredible Hulk. Like, duh. Uh, I, I gotta put on the list. Matter of fact, I'll make sure next week that'll be the next thing I'm gonna be uh covering. Um, 2008 Incredible Hulk. Duh. I gotta uh make sure I get that on the list. Good thing I looked. Uh, so yeah. So I'll make sure I cover that. So by next year, when I eventually cover like, Avengers 1 and Age of Ultron as well. Make sure. Oh yeah, I already got on. That's good. Good. Sorry, there's a lot of stuff I make sure I cover for the channel. So yeah, make sure I got all that on the list. So um so yeah, anyway, I keep forgetting that Kenneth Branagh was the first Thor director, and man, I think because here's the thing, as I was going through the film, backtracking my memory on how people, because this is around the time, like, because people forget, like, we use like there was some level of nostalgia goggles when it comes to the MCU, because on my YouTube channel I made a discussion video a couple weeks back, pretty much covering. You can check it out on my channel. It's like, what's great about Marvel's Phase 4, and I quickly went through each stuff that was given to us in Phase 4, because people have been, at that time, been hearing so much crap giving towards this phase leading to Phase 5 with Ant-Man Quantumania. Now, of course, in my estimation, if you saw my review on Ant-Man Quantumania, which, by the way, check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/talkativecarl, you can see my discussion video about the Phase 4 of the MCU, as well as Ant-Man Quantumania. But people was like, oh my god, it's we're going through superhero fatigue, and Kevin Feige is losing, like, it's like the quality is, it's like going on a downward spiral. No, we're going through an experimental phase, because people, not everybody, some people wants to know all of Kevin Feige's blueprints on how, like, why you're doing this, why you doing that, why is this, why is that. All of this stuff seems incoherent. Who's the main bad guy? What's the angle? Instead of just enjoying what's given to us. Okay. Sure, not everything is for everybody, but we had an impressive decade leading into Endgame, where it's like all the stuff that we've been given since phase 1 up to Endgame has been, strategically placed. So by the time we get to Endgame, everything that, if you've been following along, everything seems like, wow. It's like, hell of a callbacks and stuff like that fit into the overall spectrum of everything that, makes everything just click. And the people who've been poo-pooing phase 4, it sounds like things that I've been saying when phase 2 came out, where it's like Guardians of the Galaxy. Who cares about the Guardians of the Galaxy? The one with the talking raccoon and tree. And it's like, I heard of them, but it's like I didn't read none of them. It was like, it's like how that worked, and become one of people's favorite, Marvel films. And it's like, it quickly shut me up, because like, hey, all this stuff, tends to work in it, and it's like, you forget, because it's been 10 years, people will tend to forget there was Marvel's growing pains in phase 1. Here's the thing, Kevin Feige wasn't the Kevin Feige that we know now back then. Back then, he still got bosses to adhere to, but he didn't have the clout that he needed, because he was still trying to make this work. Okay, because superhero movies at that time, prior to Iron Man, have not been box office hits for the most part, except from some few outliers, like the first 2 Spider-Man films and a few of the X-Men films, and to a certain extent the first 2 Blade films. But like, there's certain films like X3 or Daredevil or Elektra or that Catwoman movie, things just like went down the crapshoot. So Kevin Feige and Jon Favreau have been like properly putting this together, working behind the scenes, making sure everything fit. So Iron Man, who was prior to the MCU, was a B-list superhero that not everybody really knew like that, but he was quickly elevated to A-list status. People not know that, unless you're in the comic book know-how. So now, like, okay, we gotta, bring in the Avengers, so we gotta bring in people that people at least heard of. And by and large, it was like, mostly white people. Straight, white people. We got, Black Widow, Hawkeye. We got Iron Man, Captain America, Hulk, and Thor. They was the primary core that would make the MCU Avengers. We were trying to see if we can like set up things that other studios have failed to do, because they didn't want to copy Marvel, but they laid out a blueprint. Was nobody's going to give them any kind of shame for following that same path, because it works. We can focus on Iron Man's story. Then if we come to Captain America, we focus on his story. And with Thor, we focus on his story. So when we eventually bring everybody together, which people were like a little weary on, for like, oh my God, how are you going to make this work? You getting all these people together and one roof, and it's like people was going to worry that it was going to be like a jumbled mess and it was going to be so unfocused. But I mean, Joss Whedon, problematic as he is, made that Avengers, because you got to get people involved that work with ensemble people before, so that everybody gets their time in the sun to make it, coherent. Like the Russo brothers or Whedon, these guys have been known to work with ensemble casts before because they worked on TV, so of course they're used to working with an ensemble cast and get everything balanced. Now, through each phase, they have to interweave different characters along the way until by phase 3, MCU reached a height of unprecedented status that the world over recognizes and appreciates and loves and respects. But the studios wouldn't allow them, at that time, to do things like the She-Hulk show or Werewolf by Night. Can you imagine any thing with a man thing or a Elsa Bloodstone in it? No, they wouldn't have done that right out the gate. It's like Elsa Bloodstone man thing. That's too much. That's why in this one, they mentioned about, because a lot of people, including me, who loves like magic related superheroes like Doctor Strange and Dr. Fate and stuff like that, and Constantine and Zatanna, it's like magic is science that we don't understand yet. BS. That's something that I really didn't care for when I first saw this, but understood why they had to put that in, because for the general audience, trying to include things like magic and the supernatural in the MCU, which is at the most sci-fi. But now that getting to when did Doctor Strange come into play? I think it was like it was phase 2. It was soon after Civil War. So you bring it in like Doctor Strange, and that way, by that point, accepting magic into the fold wouldn't be a stretch. So, eventually, when you throw in like the multiverse, Miss Marvel, this is like, and all this like werewolves and pretty soon vampires, and then eventually mutants, which people by and large is already, by and large quickly would accept without no question. But we're going through an experimental phase. Now, I'm already breaking this down in like my discussion video, so check that out with my full-blown thoughts on that. But I just want to quickly point out how it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows in the early parts of the MCU. There was trial and tribulation. They had to be meticulous, so they could not afford to do anything too crazy. So yeah, the whole science is, magic is science we don't understand yet. So they kind of had to play fast and loose with Thor's, lore, even though most people would agree, like with Wonder Woman, she's part of, they would be part of a supernatural thing because you're dealing with gods and goddesses of different mythologies. They fit into that realm of the supernatural, but they decided to go with the science fiction route, which is fine. Usually, by and large, you play fast and loose with that. So anyway, this movie stars with, of course, Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston playing Thor and Loki, which this is the first time a lot of people really knew them because they acted in other stuff prior to this. Like, Chris Hemsworth was in Cabin in the Woods. I never seen it. I've seen commercials of it back in the day, but by and large, he wasn't like a household name yet. None of the Hemsworth brothers were like that. Not until after the first 2 Thor films. And then you got Tom Hiddleston, who plays for a large part, and one of them was directed by Kenneth Branagh, which resulted in him bringing him on to audition for the role of Loki, which most people don't know. That, you probably know now, but he auditioned for the role of Thor initially, but then decided to go with him, but with to portray Loki, which honestly is a great fit. And now Tom Hiddleston, world-renowned name and synonymous with Loki. Honestly, you would not look at him and not think of Loki. And go on YouTube and check out. I think it was around the phase 1 when they was promoting the Avengers, where I think it was promoting Avengers, and he went out on stage at Comic-Con one time in full Loki getup, and everybody was going nuts and cheering, and he was like, "Say my name!" and everybody, "Loki, Loki!" and everybody went crazy. I usually love when actors do things like that, because they got so much reverence and love for the character they're portraying. Because it always turns me off when actors, it's like, oh, hate, has some, I won't say hate, but disdain for being like associated, like, oh, that's all people think of me, as this one particular character, but people love you for it. You did an exemplary job at it, and it's like, embrace it. Just like with with Ryan Reynolds with Deadpool, Tom Hardy with Venom, Tom Hiddleston with Loki. It's just like, fully embrace it. Of course, you can do other stuff. Nobody's discounting that, but people will bring up eventually. And like, if you've been in an acting game for a extended period of time, there's certain things that you're going to be synonymous for. People obviously going to bring up in press junkets here and there, from time to time. And it's like, it's the nature of the beast. I just want to bring this up about Tom Hiddleston, which I didn't even know that he has a very prestigious kind of familial ancestry. He's a great grandson of Vice Admiral Reginald Gervais, and great grandson of food producer Sir Edmund Vestey. His paternal grandfather, Alexander, served in the Royal Artillery and a plater in the shipyards. He's named after his great uncle, who's also the member of the Artillery 51st Division, Highland Division, who died in the Battle of the Somme, and his name is engraved at the Broomhill War Memorial. So it's like, he has a very impressive familial life. He has 2 sisters. One's a journalist and the other also an actress in her own right. So yeah, I thought I'd bring that up because I thought that was very fascinating. I love Tom Hiddleston. He is just like an incredible guy, all around. So I just thought I'd bring that up. Anyway. Begin the story in the past during 965 AD in Norway, where Odin, played by once again, I forgot about the casting. You got Anthony Hopkins playing as Odin, Natalie Portman playing as Jane Foster. She showed up in the sequel Dark World, one of my most hated MCU films. There's only 3 MCU films, or at least MCU related stuff, that I have a disdain for. That if you watch my YouTube tier listing of the MCU, which I'll do every phase, you can check out on my YouTube channel as well. I did the same thing with the Star Wars stuff. She only showed up. There's Thor: The Dark World, Iron Fist, and Inhumans. It's probably one of the worst, because the MCU isn't completely perfect, but I said they got like a 95 success rate when it comes to their properties. There's a few outliers. As some people might have other opinions, like some people really hate Captain Marvel, which honestly I don't really agree with. I thought it was a decently okay film. I love Brie Larson in that. Um, and and some people put Agent of Shield, in which I only put I think on the D listing because there's only 2 seasons out that I actually like this kind of like make it a decent watch because I love Phil Coulson in that, and the actor Clark Gregg who plays Phil Coulson is great. I love my fellow Chicagoan Chloe Bennett who plays Daisy Quake in that. Midnight Wind, of course, she's great. There's a lot of great actors involved. But I love the season with Ghost Rider that was in it. That was a great season, and the first season. There was only 2 seasons. I think it was actually on like high bar. Everything else is kind of like not as crazy and reckless as like what's that CW show? Crap. Legends of Tomorrow. It's not that level of crazy, but it was, it looks like it was like a couple of writing decisions away from being that level of stupid. But after the first 2 Thor films, Natalie Portman wouldn't show up until Thor: Love and Thunder, which it was some things going on behind the scenes with Natalie Portman and like the studio and everything like that. So they didn't bother to include her into anything up until 10, or I won't say 10 exactly, but maybe like 8 or 9 years later, when she eventually came back for to play Lady Thor in Thor: Love and Thunder, which she killed it in my opinion in that, because I love Natalie Portman. You got Stellan Skarsgård as Eric Selvig, which in the comics I only see him, I'm pretty sure I've seen him more than once, but the only time I actually saw the name in a comic book that I was reading was during one of the worst comic book events I ever read in my life, which I couldn't even finish after a couple of issues in. But the Secret Empire, when he's talking to an evil Captain America who's leading Hydra in secret, and he's piloting an aircraft with evil Steve Rogers. So that's the only other time I actually seen Eric Selvig in a comic book format. I haven't seen him in anything else since, not in my recollection. You got Kat Dennings as Darcy Lewis. Not many people like Darcy Lewis like that. I'm cool with Darcy. I mean, the whole joke with calling Mjolnir Mew Mew, kind of got grating. But I think Kat Dennings, is a fine actress. Not many people care like that. Clark Gregg as Phil Coulson, Colm Fiore as Laufey, Ray Stevenson as Volstagg. He was Punisher in Punisher Warzone a long time ago. Idris Elba as Heimdall. Jamie Alexander as Sif. She had a cameo role in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. one time, and then she came back for Loki season 1 as another cameo, and full on supporting cast in Thor: Love and Thunder. So she only came back. Oh, and then of course Thor, Thor: The Dark World. So it's like Thor: The Dark World, Loki, Love and Thunder, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. She only showed up 4 times throughout the entire MCU franchise. And of course this movie, so this is 5 times. 5 times she appeared as Lady Sif, and that is weird. She has that little screen time, but she always kills it every time she steps in. Renee Russo, not related to the Russo brothers, as Frigga, which the name of the wife of Odin is usually Frigg or Frey or Frigga, but it essentially is all the same thing. Um, uh, Tadanobu Asano as Hogan. Um, of course, like uh, Stuart Townsend was initially cast after Zachary Levi was forced to vacate the role due to a scheduling conflict for the role of Fendril. No, it's like Josh Dallas uh uh portrays Fendril, um part of the Warriors 3. uh uh then they wanted to go with Stuart Townsend, uh 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 because they had to switch from Zachary, because Zachary Levi took over. I forget which one came first. It's like, I'm pretty sure it was like Zachary Levi, but either way, it's like Fendril. The Warriors 3 really got done dirty because they're supposed to be like uh you know major players for like Thor's uh uh you know supporting cast in comics and in you suspect in the films. And of course in the comics, you barely get, unless you go far back as like in like the 90s and early 2000s, I read Thor here and there back in the day, and I distinctly remember the Warriors 3 being there. I don't recall them actually putting uh that much effort into writing them. I just didn't read all of them. I'm pretty sure they have a lot of time in the sun when in a lot of Thor comics. The last time I seen them so active was around this Marvel event called War of the Realms, where uh 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 I think like it's been a long time since I read it. I remember it being very good. Where what's a villain in Dark World? What was that villain in the Dark World? Shoot, I'm blanking on the guy's name. Malakath. Malakath teaming up with the Frost Giants to seize control on all the realms, with the major attack being on Midgard, and all the Marvel characters teaming up with the Asgardians to fight back against all the Jotuns and Malakath's warriors. And the Warriors 3 was pretty prominent in that. And after that event was over and you continue on with Thor's solo stories, they played some role in that, and that's like the last time I recall like the Warriors 3 really playing a major role in the comics. But I think after the MCU really kind of heightened their station in Thor's stories in the comics, and especially like Valkyrie. I recently are reading some Thor stuff with Valkyrie teaming up with Thor to find some kind of thing going on. I'm blanking on it right now, but like the MCU really knows how to make sure certain characters that probably wouldn't been that's been in the comics years ago, but never gotten elevated to the standing until like the MCU. So writers are now starting to include like Valkyrie in more pages in certain stuff, or even having them get their own comic series to highlight them in a way to like, oh, make sure we get some Valkyrie comics or Lady Sif comics, or include Volstagg here because people like to see Volstagg or Fendra or Hogan and do something with them, especially after they got killed off so unceremoniously in Ragnarok, except for Sif, which to this day I think that is just criminal. I think by the next Thor film, because clearly like Heimdall's and uh, Valhalla, you expect to see like the Warriors 3, except for Sif, in the halls of Valhalla, and somehow bring them back in some shape or form, so that way we can do something with them, because they got done dirty. This gets killed off so quickly, and well, except for Hogan, who actually has some actual fight going on. But man, it's like, Volstagg and Fendra like really got done dirty. Anyway, back to the story. Sorry, going off on these tangents. So we see like Odin fighting against the frost giants. Odin loses an eye in the fight, although I mean, certain iterations of the Asgardians, turn the light a little bit, sorry, of the Asgardians, like with the Aesir and everything like that, just like with like Greek mythology with like Disney's Hercules, they, the writers play fast and loose with the actual mythology of these, gods and goddesses. Odin, if you read the more mythological depictions of Odin, he lost an eye when he willingly gave it up for wisdom. Here, he lost an eye in his battle with Laufey and his frost giants, but he beat back the Jotuns. He took their prized weapon, the Casket of Winters, that caused like rapid freezing and winter and devastation and everything like that. Took it and brought it into the halls of Asgard as one of Odin's trophies, and set a uneasy truce between the Asgardians and the Jotuns. And since then, Odin's been raising his two sons, Thor and Loki, and one of them is gonna ascend to the throne. And I think Odin's portrayed better in the film, in the films, more so than he is in the comics. I think the comics still a little bit loose with the mythological version of Odin that we know of, but I think it's a little bit more accurate, where because Odin's kind of an ass, not as much as like Zeus is, but he's portrayed like a decent father here, but it's just he didn't he kind of set up or set in motion the animosity between between like for Loki towards Thor, because Loki seeks his father's approval kind of situation, and he wants to be the one that seize the throne, and he sees himself as a leader, and people essentially just worship him and everything like that. And Thor is obviously treated a little bit more accurately as like a young, because like certain comics, young Thor behave like an arrogant kid, like an arrogant kind of young 20 something, even though he's thousands of years old. But depending on how gods age, their teenage years will probably be somewhere around the 1,000-year to 2,000-year marker, until like they break out of that by the time they're 3 to 4,000 year marker, I'm assuming. Check out my, I think I briefly touched on this in my Thor comic book review, with him dealing with the god Gore the God Butcher for the first time. Check that out. This is my first Thor comic review. Check that out on my YouTube channel as well. So we got, you know, a more adult Thor now, you know, going through a ceremony where he's about to, you know, be, you know, crowned king of Asgard by his father. And I remember, you know, it was highlighted on like a Facebook feed one time where, you know, there's a look that Frigg gives after the line is given from Odin about like my firstborn. And of course, if you watch Ragnarok, Thor isn't technically the firstborn, it's Hela. And of course, it's like a shameful past that Odin decided he wanted to bury, and only Frigg would probably will know the truth like that. But in the mythological records, Hela is Loki's daughter. And he's, you know, he birthed like a few children. One of them is supposed to be some kind of 8-legged horse that Odin rides on to as he goes into battle, kind of thing. And then there's Fenrir the wolf that in the movies, you know, is like a pet of Hela, but, you know, is also one of Loki's children. You know, take it for what you will. And that's destined to kill Odin and by Ragnarok. But it didn't play like that here. And as a matter of fact, even though the movies didn't have the goddess of death, even though they should cast a goddess of death, because in the comics, that's what Thanos' ultimate goal is, to be with death and please her by causing, you know, wiping out half of the universe just to get her to speak to him. Even though she speaks to Deadpool a lot more, because she got more of a thing for Deadpool over Thanos. But don't want to get off on another tangent, but that's just funny to me. It would have been kind of fun to have Hela hook up, who she's the goddess of death, technically, just not the death. But if you want to have a death, you have perfect casting with, you know, Kate Blanchett as Hela. She looks stunning as death. I love her look. And have her as at least a death and hook up with Thanos. Because you know, got those two together. That is like brilliant. I don't know why they didn't go down that route. But you know, they was going through the ceremony, but a couple of ice giants sneak into Asgard, somehow behind always watchful eye of Heimdall, and try to steal back the Casket of Winters. Of course, thanks to Odin's security system and the fact that he's always got an eye on things because he always monitors things, he sent out his destroyer, his ultimate weapon, and killed the trespassers immediately. And as him, Thor, and Loki entered the chambers with all those items that Loki sees over time, I mean Odin sees over time, he you know, Thor was like, you know, he's very brash and, like I said, arrogant and prideful. Like, you know, it's like, you know, this is, you know, breaking the truce. You know, we need to march down there and like, you know, do something about it, because they they broke in somehow, and we gotta find out why. And of course, Odin says, "No, no, no. We, they didn't make it out here. They didn't take anything. We like these probably just like these little outliers that's acting on their own more than likely. We handle them. We don't need to engage because leader is kind of like a pretty good president. Think of it this way, where it's like you know you don't because like Thor wants to press the nuclear weapon off the bat, while Odin, who's a seasoned king, says like, no, we will not go and full on war with another race where we already have like an already unshaking alliance. Look, these are probably a few outliers. We don't need to, you know, engage. But I agree more so with Odin, but Thor did have a point that, yeah, these might be a few outliers. Of course, we know it's not, but this might be a few outliers, but it's, they did technically were the, like Laufey, these, like, I would have brought one of the bodies back to like, well, not even like a body, but it's just like, go there, not like a full-blown army, but like like set up like a message to Laufey that I want to have a meeting with you. Something went down, like I bring me and a couple of like an emissary and a couple of soldiers, meet Laufey with one of his emissaries and a couple of his people, and like have a dialogue and say, hey, do you know anything about, because I found like there's 2 dead Jotun in my trophy chambers attempt to steal a casket of winters from my palace. Do you know anything about that? Of course, you will lie and everything like that. It's like, and you just say like, hey, I'm going to chalk it up to maybe some kind of outliers that acted on their own behalf and not yours. Like, I want to make sure that I hear from your words that you did not place this order. I'm going to believe you, but trust and believe. I don't want this kind of thing happening again, because then you'll be breaking this treaty. And trust and believe, I will return with a full-blown army. I just want to make sure that like this is not like a thing, because that'd probably be a smart play. So kind of like me, I'm trying to see both sides on these kind of situations here, because of course they don't know if it's Laufey directly who instigated this. We don't just go be accusatory, but I do agree to some level with Thor, where it's like they did technically break a treaty. They, somehow snuck past our defenses and tried to steal from us. And like, this would have been an act of war, but of course you don't want to jump the gun. Let's check with them and see what's up. Because like, yeah, if it happens again, yeah, then like, hey, I would like, okay, fine. Because I might believe you, but if this happened again, I'm just gonna like, okay, I'm gonna chalk it up. Okay, you probably gonna act the work because I went with you, so you should have like make sure you check with your people, make sure nip it in the bud, and make sure none of them are trying to do anything. Because like because we don't want like another casualties of unending war, because neither one of us will sustain it, and we'll suffer too many losses on both sides, which is not going to benefit nobody. Anyway, Thor's in his feelings because like he wants to go out there and like handle things his own way instead of diplomatically, and so he gathers the Warriors 3 and Sif and Loki, so they'll sneak with thanks to Heimdall, because he's under orders to follow wherever like Odin says, because he followed whoever his leader says. But he deep down wants to know, okay, how these Jotuns get past his watchful eye. That is unheard of to me. So I want to know how. So he just happens to go on break, leaving his sword where it's like a key to allow the Bifrost Bridge, which I like this unique take on the Bifrost Bridge because, you know, in some cases, the bridge is actually like, you know, the a bridge to different parts of the world tree to different worlds like Midgard or Muspelheim or Vanaheim. Uh, uh, you play like, you know, God of War. I love their take on like the world tree being like a bridge because like a key to like warp them. I imagine they took some inspiration from this movie, the way they use like, because essentially the Rainbow Bridge. So let's be honest, from Mario Kart, but um, it's like a power tool in order for them to be pointed to a particular map on the world tree to a particular world they want to go to, and it just, you know, turns and points to a particular part of space, and that's where they'll warp to. um I love that usage. It's very unique and very clever. And oh, I also bring up about Kenneth Branagh being a director very quickly. People are getting kind of sick and tired of um some people, not everybody, Taika Waititi take on Thor, even though, because I think people at the time crapped on Kenneth Branagh's, well, they're not crap on him because it was like an origin story for Thor, so they kind of let it pass. It was like an okay origin story. It wasn't like the level of the first Iron Man, but it was still pretty okay. But Dark World kind of sucked. The director there, they wanted to go with Patty Jenkins, but due to scheduling conflicts, they went with another person. I think Patty Jenkins would have done great with Thor, but they went to Taika Waititi after the situation with, you know, Dark World and how crappy of turnout that was, and the writing was god awful. So they was like, okay, they needed a shift because it was like super serious, and like, you know, it's just like nothing was working. So they pivoted with Taika Waititi, and it made it like a fun romp, like, you know, Guardians of the Galaxy, and that's where they kind of stuck with it. I think, you know, they could easily work with Kenneth Branagh. I think he had like a decent, you know, middle ground where it's like, and I am even admit in my Love and Thunder review that, okay, this is probably the first time that I felt people's misgivings about the MCU when it comes to their formula, when it comes to comedic timing, where it's like your excessive need to try to throw in a joke when some serious moments need to be played out. You don't need to insert a joke here to undercut it. It kind of takes people out of it and kind of usurp the serious tones that you're trying to deliver as well. And I think Kenneth Branagh knows how to balance that out, where the next director with Dark World played it too far on the serious side. You know, they kind of trying to make it like because the second movie gotta be like the more serious one, like Dark Knight kind of stuff. That's what was playing out like that at the time. But then they pivoted to Taika Waititi, and some people didn't care for Ragnarok, but, you know, by a large part, people enjoyed Ragnarok and Taika Waititi's take on it. But he eventually leaned too hard into that comedic style, where it's kind of, you know, overtook a lot of moments that could have worked. When it's like I said, there was no balance. You kind of went too far with what you like to do with the comedic elements, and it's like, you know, enough joking, okay? But anyway, so Thor and his group go to Jotunheim. He confronts Laufey. Of course, he denies, you know, sending people there. They call him like, and he, you know, sprinkles in something like there might be a traitor in your midst kind of situation. Of course, we know it's Loki. He's the first villain that the Avengers fought, that they assembled together to deal with in the Avengers comics in the first place, and also to match that with the movie. So after when the Frost Giants make a princess comment about Thor, that's when a fight ensues. Loki, after being touched by one of the Jotuns, discovers like his skin turning blue, and so this raised an eyebrow for him. And then Odin shows up, saves everybody, but he's furious that now that what Thor did instigated a war between them and the Jotuns. He and with an awesome display of acting between these three phenomenal actors, Hopkins, Hemsworth, and Hiddleston. It's like, you're a vain, greedy, cool boy, and you're an old man and a fool. And it's like the whole entire spot was so good. It's like one of the most memorable parts in Thor films. And so Odin stripped Thor from his power, banished him to Midgard for what he did, and took his hammer and put the enchantment on it to where it's like, whoever shall hold this hammer, if they deem worthy, shall possess the power of Thor. It's amazing that, I was about to say it's amazing that, Jane Foster never picked it up before, but this is long before Lady Thor was even like a thing in anybody's mind. So it wouldn't have been like probably a credible situation for her to pick it up at any point. So both Thor and Mjolnir was cast down to Earth in New Mexico, where he ends up bumping into Jane Foster and her crew. So they take him to the hospital where he has like no power, even though he's still freaking Chris Hemsworth and ripped to all hell. It's like, dude's just shredded. Like, oh my god. It's like he could easily crush people's heads like grapes if he wanted to. It's not as big as, ridiculously big as like The Rock, but it's still shredded. Like every guy in the Hemsworth family is just shredded to all knows what. I mean, wow. So he breaks out of the hospital, even after Foster realizes from their exploration, because they're astrophysicists, and they realize from one of the photos that they took where this phenomenon portals, because they, the rainbow, the Bifrost Bridge is to people the Einstein-Rosen Bridge, or a wormhole. So they realize one of the silhouettes is like, man-shaped. So they go back to find Thor, where you had this little fun moment where he's in a diner, he's eating food, and he's just like putting away all those pancakes. He's drinking coffee, and of course he's just like, I love this. Smash, like, bring me another. And ever since then, I don't actually smash a cup, but when I have something like a pretty good drink, and I'll just do that. It's like, I love this. Bring me another. It's like, I always do that when I'm like having like a good drink, and it's like, oh my god, it was one of the most memorable moments, underrated moments in the MCU as far as like things that kind of stuck with you. And matter of fact, if you watch this on YouTube, leave a comment below. Let me know what underrated MCU scenes that you love that need to be talked about, because honestly, that one is out there for me as far as like an underrated scene that always stuck with me and being like so hilarious and fun. And then all the while this is going on, the hammer is being found by a bunch of citizens, including Stanley, and everybody's trying to lift it, and they have like this big old cookout all around this hammer that nobody's able to pick up because nobody's worthy. And of course, this happens not too soon after the events of Iron Man 2. And Phil Coulson comes by, set up a perimeter, and has a bunch of SHIELD agents, including Sitwell, who we know is an Hydra agent and everything like that, is monitoring this hammer and is giving off like energy signatures. Of course, it's electricity, obviously. And once Thor finds out, he and Jane go to Sylvie, Darcy, and Foster think he's crazy because he's talking about like Bifrost, Thor, Odin, and things like that. And imagine like the Scar, because like there's a line with like Eric Selvig where it's like, this is stories I grew up with. Like, your parents told you stories about Odin and everything like that. It's like a bedtime story or something. I imagine it's like, because maybe Skarsgård is Norwegian in like by biology. Yeah, it's like Swedish, I guess, but not too that far away from like the whole location. So it is not too far. I imagine like Norwegian, Swedish people, they probably have like that's their like kind of pantheon and stuff like that. But in large part, it's kind of like the same way with people from like like Mexico has like their like Mayan and gods and lore and everything like that, that kind of situation. Anyway, so Thor and Jane go all the way down to the facility, and Thor, he's like a huge dude, somehow sneaks in, knocks out a couple of guards, and he's just fighting them off, just brute force. And by the time this is your first introduction in with Hawkeye, because it took me a hot minute to realize that was Clint Barton, because I'm pretty sure I've seen General Renner and other stuff in history, but this is the first time that actually kind of stuck with me that this is Hawkeye, and it just grabbing a bow and everything like that, and it didn't kind of stuck with me until by the Avengers. And it's like he just like seeing this guy just plowing through, and he's like, Coulson, you better call it, because I'm starting to root for this guy, because he's seeing this guy just plowing through a bunch of people. And of course, by the time he mixes to the hammer, he can't lift it. He's not worthy. He's still like an arrogant, kind of fool. And so he's being held by the SHIELD agents. Loki comes to him because this is after he had like a big blow up with Odin. Come to realize that he's actually Laufey's son that Odin took from the Jotuns after the war. Odin saying like he's smaller than the average Jotun, and he was going to be left there to left there, and I couldn't just do that, so I took you and raised you as my own. And I guess thanks to like, because he just starting to like this baby's starting to turn from blue to a normal pigment color, and I can't help but think about like the what if stuff with like what if Thor was the only child, and like Thor, Odin actually gave him back to Laufey, and he was raised as like a leader of the Jotuns, and he's best friends with Thor, and Thor was the only child, and he's even not arrogant, but like the only child where it's like he got everything he wanted. He's just party Thor. He's like just like a frat boy. Um, um, and then also I can't help but think about the whole what if with the Ant-Man situation where it's like Ant-Man killed off the a few of the original Avengers, like uh, uh, Stark and Black Widow and Thor by messing with Hawkeye's bow and causing a fire and killing Thor right on the spot. It causes like a international war between Midgard and Asgardians and stuff like that. It was, like I said, I caught only the highlights of the what if stuff. I didn't see like the entire thing except for the one with Star-Lord, Black Panther, and the last episode of What If. I'm not a fan of What If, but anyway, I couldn't help but think about that. But Odin fell into Odin's sleep, so Loki took up the throne and wanted the throne. He had a disdain for Thor secretly, even though they all knew, like even Sif admitted, like he's always been jealous of Thor. And so Loki showed us like true colors, especially after a confrontation with Heimdall. And so I can't help but think about the mythological history that is of Loki, because Heimdall and Loki had, in the mythology, had some kind of animosity towards each other. And you see like Heimdall, doesn't like Loki like that. He's trying to sweet talk him, using that silver tongue against him. Like Heimdall wasn't trying to hear it. It turns out that Loki found uses magics that was talked about his mother in order to make secret passageways that Heimdall can't see, in order to have people come in and him to leave whenever he wants to, and goes to Laufey to set up pretty much a fake out between, he still sees himself as an Asgardian, but he's playing Laufey, so trying to, his plan is to have the Jotuns sneak in, kill Odin in his sleep, but Loki swoops in and he ends up killing Laufey in the end. But it's like, look at me, I'm the savior, I'm the hero who stopped Odin from being assassinated. That kind of thing. That was his overall plan. He goes to Thor and feeds him this lie that the whole threat of war was too much for Odin to bear, so he died, and from like I guess like a version of a stroke or whatever. And he tell like, mother doesn't want you to come back because the whole situation with peace can remain as long as you remain in exile, kind of situation. And so now that the Warriors 3 is like, not having it with like Loki's rule, they decide to go and try to bring Thor back. All the while, Thor is starting like a romance with Jane Foster. And here's the thing, because I won't say I'm not, because I don't know when or ever if I'm going to do a review on Thor: The Dark World, but I want to mention this here now, that the one thing that I was kind of expecting from before I even saw Dark World in the theaters, though, because it was like a little moment in the trailer of Dark World where it's like Sif gives Jane Foster a look when she goes to Asgard, and there was a moment in it was like 90s and early 2000 comics of Thor where I know there was like an animosity Sif had against Jane Foster, because initially people expect like Thor and Sif to be together, even though like in the mythology these two were meant to like wed and have children and everything like that. But I didn't want like a full cat fight or anything like that, or sniping at each other or anything like that. But I expected something in Dark World where Sif had some kind of words with Jane, where it's like, I had a thing for Thor, but I see the way he looks at you, so I know it's probably not gonna happen. I just want you to make sure you treat him well, blah 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 blah, something like that. I expected something, because you did give him some kind of weird look that was never really explored. I'm not sure, but I just wanted something, not a full-blown cat fight, but some kind of discussion. But so deciding that he's content with just living on Midgard with Jane Foster and her friends, and the Warriors 3 show up and tells Thor that nothing's wrong with Odin, which clues in Thor that Loki's been lying to everybody this whole doggone time. And so Loki sends out the Destroyer to eliminate Thor, anybody in its way. And I like this moment with Phil Coulson and Thor after well, I'm getting ahead of myself. The Warriors 3 try to fight off the Destroyer while everybody's trying to trying to get the people in this town in Mexico to evacuate so there won't be any casualties. I love like Thor just walking up knowing that Loki can hear him, and just says like maybe, now I'm thinking about it, because I always wonder like maybe like it was through the Destroyer he could have hear Thor's words. But now I'm thinking about it, because considering that they're technically gods, if you're praying to them, it's kind of like a walkie-talkie effect, whereas maybe like one way kind of discussion, kind of situation where Loki can actually hear Thor, and his Thor's just technically praying to Loki because he's human now, and is speaking through that way so Loki can hear him. It's like, I love this delivery where Thor is like, I don't know what I did that caused you to feel like you need to lash out at me, brother, but these people don't deserve it. If you want to take anybody's life, please take mine. I don't know what I did, but please, and they don't deserve this kind of situation. Trying to appeal to Loki ain't like having it, so he have the Destroyer fire on him. He's fatally wounded, but because of that act, that selfless act, he becomes worthy again. The hammer flies to him and becomes Thor again, and he destroys the Destroyer. And he talks with this had this moment with Phil Coulson, and it's like, you have an ally in me as long as you return everything that you stole from Jane. And of course Phil Coulson's like, yeah, you can have your stuff back, because we're gonna need you to on other projects and everything like that. So Thor goes to the Bifrost, and he transports back to him and the Warriors 3 are transferred back to Asgard, and Thor and Loki duke it out. Even though Thor doesn't want to fight his brother, with this newfound inspiration. Here's the thing, because I couldn't, because I found this funny, because just like in the comics, where the movie portrays, Thor is sent to Midgard to learn humility and learn how to be a true leader and a hero, which he does. In the comics, in the past few years at this point, because Odin's kind of an a-hole to a certain level. Probably like, I don't know how the writers are writing Odin. I don't know if it was like purposely just making him like like an a-hole for no reason, or maybe they're trying to be somewhat akin to the mythology, somewhat. But I don't think it's, they're doing it to a degree where it's kind of like making Odin more unlikable than he needs to be. But anyway, in the comics, it seems like the way like Thor is operating, because technically right now Thor is the leader of Asgard. He's the new Odin, but it's just the way he still want to go about doing his Avengers duties and being a hero to Midgard. Odin has like an issue, the way he's going about doing it, because Thor is doing it his own way instead of doing it the way Odin wants him to do it. It's the same thing with a lot of parents, where it's like you don't let your kids do things their own way because they're their own person. You gotta micromanage kind of situation. And it's like now it's like, given the fact that you the one didn't like the way your kid was acting arrogant and prideful and all the other stuff, and you send him banished to Midgard to learn humility. He does that and he becomes like a hero. Now that you're mad that he's taking things to another level, or not another level, but he's just behaving in a way that you wanted him to do, to learn from, and now you're mad because he's not doing it in the way that you wanted to do it, or at least now that he reached a certain height that you expect him to ascend to a level like, okay, you did your hero thing, now it's time to be a leader, you gotta do it this way, and blah blah blah. It's kind of weird to me. And now with this, fighting with Loki is like, what's this newfound love you have for the Jotuns all of a sudden? Because Loki's planning on using the Bifrost, because it's established early in the film that if the Bifrost is left on too long on a particular planet that it's aiming at, then it will cause like a mass, it'll just become like a death laser at a certain point, and it becomes like a world ender kind of situation, like a Death Star. And Loki turned it to a weapon now, and Thor is telling him to turn that off because it's that's not, you can't destroy a whole race of people. And it's like, you was gonna do that anyway, so now all of a sudden you don't want to do it. Was it that girl all of a sudden made you want to act this way? And so because Loki doesn't understand. Of course, this is original canon Loki, not the whole Loki TV series Loki, dealing with Mobius and Kang the Conqueror situation. That's like a Loki that went off on a different timeline pathway. Because either way, he ended up learning a lesson in his own way of humility and being a hero and stuff like that. This Loki is the one that's take the long path to that lesson by Infinity War, whereas Loki TV series Loki, it went off on a shorter pathway to that lesson in a way, thanks to viewing his predestined timeline lesson of how he got to this way and his ultimate death and everything like that. So his only way to make sure that the Bifrost doesn't utterly destroy the Jotunheim, he destroys the bridge, effectively destroying the machine, and this nearly causes the brothers to fall off into the vacuum of space, but Odin wakes up in time, catches them, and Loki says like, I did this all for you, father. And Odin's like, no, Loki, not approving what he's been doing this whole time. And so Loki decides to fall into the vacuum of space, which effectively causes him to go in the wormhole, which lands him in the Midgard. And you see in the post credits, he's manipulating Selvig with the well, it didn't fall immediately to Midgard. Along the way, he falls into the space where he meets with Thanos, and like in order to gain a rule, wants to rule. That's his ultimate goal. He wants to rule, so he decides he wants to rule Midgard. But in return, I will help you find these items, the Infinity Stones and stuff like that. That's why he was like instrumental with the whole Tesseract situation. Of course, you already know that. Temporarily, Thor is cut off from Midgard, but of course, thanks to Odin's magic, he's able to like give him transport to Midgard. So that's where he is until like the Bifrost is fixed up. But Odin mentions how proud of he is with his son, and what the person he turns into be. But yeah, and of course, like all the while, Jane Foster is finding a way to try to get back to Thor. Anyway, that is the first Thor film, and next week I will be covering, because I haven't seen it in a mighty long time, as a matter of fact, 2008's Incredible Hulk movie with Edward Norton, mind you. So yeah, let me know in the comments below what you thought of Thor, the first movie. I think it's pretty solid. I put it like you check my MCU ranking. I'm pretty sure I put it very mid-tier because it was still pretty good film. It didn't blow my socks off like the first Iron Man or anything like that. But as far as like origin story, it's pretty solid for Thor. Nice establishing of the supporting cast, and one of the most incredible Marvel villains to date, Loki, who now at this point is technically a hero. Even in the comics, he's technically a hero now, because he turns like Harley Quinn. They're establishing a nice long growth, because they've been villains for such a long time that after like I think several years ago, maybe like 5 to 7 years by this point, they had like a pivot where they started like anti-hero to like full-on hero at this point. But anyway, I will see you guys in a few minutes. I'll be covering another movie, another Disney movie called Saving Mr. Banks, starring Tom Hanks and Emma Thompson. So I'll see you guys in a little bit. Peace.